It was September of my grade 9 year, and I happened to look over my left shoulder. Are they talking about me? I mean, I remember trying to focus on the math lesson from the room, but I couldn't help but notice two girls looking over, laughing and giggling. You know, I didn't realize at the time, but I'd committed one of the cardinal sins of grade 9 students that were just trying to fit in. They had caught me picking my nose. Here I was, brand new to school, just trying to fit in, and now I'm the laughing stock in front of two of the coolest girls in my grade. Unfortunately, high school didn't get much better for me from there. You see, growing up, I'd always been considered smart. But as school got more difficult, I really felt like I didn't have the self-discipline to respond with more effort. My grades got worse and worse, until I felt like I had no self-confidence whatsoever. And I don't feel like these feelings are all that uncommon. I see it all the time in my students. Students who want to do something amazing or make their mark in the world. But first of all, they don't even know what the first step that they need to take is, let alone having all the skills and self-confidence it takes to achieve your dreams. There's a big push in education to bring technology in the classroom, preparing our students for jobs that don't exist, and we're taught 1,000 different pedagogical ways to better teach our students, and those are all wonderful. But one area that hasn't got enough attention lately is character. And in my opinion, character education is the most important activity we can teach our students. So character education is all the explicit and the implicit activities that lead to student growth. And there's a wide variety of reasons why it's important. The first is it gives our students a moral and ethical foundation on which to attack the world, teaching them skills like honesty, integrity, respect for others. Secondly, it improves their social and intellectual intelligence, equipping them with the skills to better handle their emotions as well as the emotions of others, leading to better interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, empathy. And finally, teaching character not only equips our students and gives them more resilience, but it allows them to have a more positive attitude. By teaching skills like resilience, developing a growth mindset, forming good habits, not only are we preparing our students for their future and their future down the road, but we're also minimizing some of the negative aspects that come with adolescence, such as stress, anxiety, depression. I should also say that character education isn't something that we should be teaching our littlest and then get away from as they get older, or vice versa, but character education needs to be taught in a continuum. Probably the best way I ever heard described was by the Jubilee Center for Character and Virtues, who says that first, character needs to be caught, then taught, and then finally, character needs to be sought. So character caught is when our students recognize character traits in those around them and recognize, hopefully, positive traits, which is why, as educators, as a parent, there can be nothing more valuable than being a positive role model. I try to also emphasize character traits that I think my students need most of all. Now, I'm a high school teacher, and I will always preach the importance of perseverance. Now, I'm a lifelong runner, but I'm relatively new in the foray of ultramarathons. Ultramarathons are anything that's longer than a marathon. And last year, I signed up for my longest race ever, a 50-miler, run through Halliburton Forest. And I had big plans to train, but I never really got there. I got injured early in the year and couldn't put in the miles I wanted to. But come race day, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to run it anyways, and if I drop out, not a big deal. I got that built-in excuse already. So the gun went off, and to say that was the most difficult physical undertaking of my entire life would be an absolute understatement. And I remember my absolute lowest point. I was 53 kilometers in. I had been running through the forest for over an hour, hadn't seen another single soul, and all the water that I was carrying with me was gone. And then I got to the hill. And, I mean, these hills are unlike anything we have in the KW region. It was massive. And about a third of the way up, I had to quit. There was a rock right there, and I sat on the rock. And the second I sat down, all the emotions that I had been holding back for the entire day came flooding to the surface. I would love to say that I started crying, but I really felt like I had not enough water left in my body for tears, so it's just more of like a blubber, I would say. And I thought about quitting. How easy would it be for me to go down this hill, wait at the bottom for someone to pick me up? My pain would be over. then I thought about my students. And I thought, what would I say to them if they got to a very difficult time in their lives, or they didn't know what to do or where to go? What would I say to them? And what I would say is, just take one more step. So I got off the rock, and that's what I did. I went and I took one step, and then another, and then 10 more, and then 10 more after that, and eventually I made it to the top of the hill, and I thought, well, I might as well just keep going now. And then using these small little goals of 100 to 200 meters at a time, I'm happy to say I eventually finished the race. Now, the most ironic part about that whole situation was, months later, after my wounds had healed and my toenails had grown back, I'm happy to say that that moment, sitting on that rock, was the most influential. No, it was the best moment of my 2022. So character caught is so incredibly important, but character taught can be equally important. How can we explicitly teach character traits to our students and do it effectively? Because I know I've done effectively and not so much. So when I first heard about growth mindset over 10 years ago, I thought, this is it. This is going to save education. When I was in high school, I had a very fixed mindset. Never went outside my comfort zone. Never would raise my hand in class, even if I was like 95% sure I knew an answer. Because what if I was wrong? So if I can teach my students to develop a growth mindset, I'll save them a lot of the trouble that I experienced when I was a student myself. So that coming year, I read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, the New Philosophy of Success. And I created a series of lessons that I was going to teach all throughout the semester about all things related to growth mindset. And when I first began to talk about growth mindset with my students at the beginning of the semester, their eyes lit up. They loved the idea. But I got to say, by like week 8, week 9, week 10, I'd be like, okay, guys, time for our growth mindset training. There'd be a lot more like eyes glazed over and more, are we still doing this? Because they were so sick of me just telling them how character traits. I realized at that moment that although teaching growth mindset is important, we have to do it more effectively. And I've spent a lot of time since then figuring out how to do that. And one area I've found a lot of success with is through storytelling. Because as a species, we've been telling stories for thousands of years. We're absolutely hardwired for them. So if I can effectively tell stories in my classroom, not only can I engage my students, but I can pass on the messages I want to pass on. So for example, with my grade 9s, I'll always talk about the periodic table, but when I do, I'll talk about the founder of the periodic table, Dmitri Mendeleev, but also I'll talk about Dmitri's mother, Maria, who when Dmitri was still a boy, packed up her meager belongings, traveled 2,000 miles on horseback through the Ural Mountains, braving a Siberian winter. Her only goal? Looking for schooling for her son. Giving up her life in the process, but eventually she found it. And I have to say, without her sacrifices, would we even know the name Dmitri Mendeleev, who's now regarded as the father of the periodic table? Or Susan LaFlèche-Picotte, who was living on a native reservation in the early 1900s and saw that a white doctor refused to come treat an elderly woman who eventually died. And at that moment, Susan committed herself to becoming a medical doctor, overcoming the poverty that she experienced and that she saw all around her, overcoming the racial and the gender discrimination that was surrounding her and she had to deal with every day of her life. But against all those odds, she did it. She became the first Indigenous medical doctor. And true to her word, she went back to help her people. I mean, stories like this and thousands more can not only engage our students, but we can tell stories from so many different perspectives and starting points. So character caught is important, character taught, but character sought is when students will begin to start taking character traits into their own hands. This is why, as educators, we need to give them the opportunity to do this. Through co-op, through experiential learning, or even bringing leaders and community members into your school can be really valuable. A few years back, some colleagues and me developed an idea which we eventually called Innovation Week. Innovation Week consisted of a few different parts, but the most powerful was we brought leaders, we brought innovators, we brought entrepreneurs from the KW region into our school to run workshops, but not just that, but tell their story to our kids. And I have to say that students absolutely loved it. Because when you think about it, they feel so far removed from those leaders, from those innovators. But they were once exactly like them. sitting in perhaps some boring science teacher's grade 10 science class, wondering when in the world any of this is going to be relevant to their lives. So character education is so incredibly important, but the problem is sometimes it's not easy to measure. But when you see the effects, it can change your life. So when I first got into education, I wanted respect. No, I demanded respect. There's an old saying that in education, don't let them see you smile till November. That was kind of me. And Alan was in one of those early classes, and he came with a lot of baggage. I mean, he wasn't a behavioral issue. He was just so apathetic about everything. I remember phoning his grandma, who was his legal guardian, the second week of the semester, and you could tell from the conversation she didn't know how to deal with him either. Well, about a month in the semester, Alan began to have trouble outside of class and stopped coming. Couldn't get him back. Unfortunately, you see this from time to time in education. Students will show up for a little bit and then just kind of disappear. So I thought that was the case with Alan. So I didn't think much about Alan until the next year. There was a late addition to my class list. Alan! But you know what? He didn't come to the grade 9 class last year as a grade 9, so why would he come this year as a grade 10? So first day began. I was going through my first day spiel. Alan wasn't there. And about 10 or 15 minutes in class, I was explaining my expectations to my students. And what do I hear from behind me in the doorway? "What's up, Stevie B?" I look, and there's Alan there. Big goofy grin on his face. So of course, me being the new teacher, right, Stern, I had to crank it up even more, right? And I had to go talk to him in the hall. And Alan understood. Alan understood that wasn't appropriate. And Alan came to class, and he actually worked that year. I mean, he wasn't getting 90s or whatever, but he was doing enough. And I learned a lot about it from that experience. I learned that his father had been in and out of his life for years, that his mother was battling a drug addiction. And I got a chance to talk to him about some of the things I've talked about today, about the importance of character, overcoming your failures and not letting them define you as a person. Well, after passing my class, I see Alan in the hall occasionally, but other than a little wave and a "how you doing," we wouldn't really communicate that much. So I didn't think much about him until a few years later. It was the very first day of school. I was inviting a new cohort of students into my room, and what do I hear behind me in the hallway? "What's up, Stevie B?" It's like I knew who it was before even looking around, but there he was, Alan. Same big goofy grin on his face, high school graduate, starting a career in construction, figuring out the next stage of his life, like we all were back then. And then he held out his hand and said to me, "Mr. Bryson, thank you for believing me when I didn't even believe in myself." And I remember thinking to myself, "Alan, I don't know how much I really did believe in you." But you never know the impact you're going to have. This is who we're helping. This is why character education is so important. To help Alan overcome his failures and realize his potential. Or to reach me when I was in high school, feeling lost, alone, insecure, not sure what the next step should be. Or you, wherever you're at in your journey. But it's not easy, and we need to be intentional about it. So I'd like to leave you with a couple thoughts. The first, educators, guardians, continue to model the behavior you want our students to have. Remember, they're on a journey just like we were and just like we are. They're going to make mistakes. But believe in them, and who knows? Maybe one day they'll even learn to believe in themselves. And students, while you're out here, know that there's so many adults in your life, some more vocal, some behind the scenes, but there's so many of us that are rooting you on, and we can't wait to see who you will become. Thank you.